Right, let's move on then. Now we've established the context. We're going to dive into the aim of the annual STB conference. It's to provide a place where all 7 of England's STBs come together to share their work with their stakeholders and partners. And to that end, let me explain how today's programme is going to work. Much of it geared around those wicked challenges that I mentioned and that Hugh Merriman also talked about in his opening address, covering the areas that are common to all. The format is broadly an opening address to frame and define the challenge, and then a series of quick briefings from representatives from across the STB family, who will outline a particular aspect of their work as a way of priming a panel discussion and questions to them, and of course some questions from you in the audience. So think about that when you are hearing the briefings. Okay. So our first wicked challenge is on the EV transition. So we are going to have a couple of scene setters. And first up, I'd like to invite Shane Rees, Partnerships Consultant at ChargePoint operator Chargy. Shane.
Okay, cool. Hello, everyone. I'm Shane. I work at Chargy. We're an awesome public charging company, if you haven't heard of us. But that's all I'm going to say about what we do, because my task today is to frame our wicked challenge on this really important transition to electric vehicles. So what's this? So we're talking about electric cars. Why are you looking at a picture of a guy walking across a rope between the World Trade Center towers? Well, that's Philippe Petit. 50 years ago, he walked between the 2 towers of the World Trade Center, accomplishing the performance of a lifetime. Took him 6 years to prepare for that. What's 6 years out from now? A really important date in our calendar, 2030, when we're thinking about how many charge points we're going to need to enable people to make that electric vehicle transition. And like Philippe accomplishing his goal, as he put it, I want to put my wire between 2 beautiful buildings and walk between it. Huh? That's about the extent of my French. Apologies to any French people in the room. Like he accomplished the performance of his lifetime, and a really important goal to him, we have important goals to achieve too. So we're talking about reducing carbon emissions for climate change, improving air quality by reducing pollutants, and enabling everyone, whether you have a driveway or not, to find a fair and affordable way to take part in this EV transition. So, like Philippe's story, there are lots of parallels between the challenges he faced and the challenges we face together. And I boil those down to 3 things. So, ambition, collaboration, and risk. And we're going to talk a little bit about those things just to set up the challenge. So, on ambition, I kind of see that changing in 2 ways. So our ambition for scale is rising, and our ambition for distance is falling. But that's a good thing. I'll tell you why. So ambition for scale. So I've been in the sector for about 5 years now, and when I started, a charge point project of around 100 charge points was huge. Nowadays, that's just a trial. You know, demonstrate what you can do. Oh, we'll stick 100 charge points in. 5 years ago, that was a big deal. We're seeing councils raise their ambitions for the number of charge points they want in their areas to start thinking in thousands, not just hundreds. When you think back a couple of years ago, when the government published its national EV charging infrastructure strategy and said we're going to need around 300,000 charge points, or maybe up to 700,000 public charge points in 2030. People reacted saying, that's ludicrous, we don't need that many. We don't have that many petrol stations or that many petrol pumps. Why would we need so many electric vehicle charging points? Now, as we've crossed some important thresholds in the last year. Last year we crossed the 50,000 public charge point threshold. And crucially, 40% of those 50,000 were installed in 2023. So as we prove our ability to install more charge points faster in more locations, so that big number of 300,000 or the even bigger number of 700,000 seems to feel more achievable. And when you look at the goals that you might find, the targets you might find within Nevis, the tool that you'll have access to, or someone in your council has access to help forecast how the vehicle population will change in your area and how many charge points you're going to need to support that. Well, when you add all of those numbers up, you come out to somewhere between 400,000 and 500,000 is what those forecasts are pushing towards. So 300,000 is not so ludicrous. 500,000 is probably where we're going to end up. So that's that scale. So we've gone from hundreds to thousands to hundreds of thousands very quickly, and we've proven that we can do it. Now on distance, what do I mean by distance? Well, the distance that from you, someone without a driveway, have to the nearest public charge point. And what that means in terms of your convenience and your confidence to make the switch to electric cars. So charging, access to charging is one of the #1 barriers, and all the research that comes up is the thing that holds people back from switching to electric cars. Convenience is a massive factor in helping more people, normal people, not just EV enthusiasts or your inner Greta, to switch to electric cars. You know, how is it going to affect me as my lifestyle? And let's look at the change, how that's changed over recent years. So again, when I started, the focus was on car parks, and thinking, well, we'll put some charge points in car parks, and that'll be great. That'll be good enough for people who live within a 10, 15, 20-minute walk. That's what they'll use as their daily, everyday charging method. Then a couple of years, end of 2020, Field Dynamics, the consultancy, published their on-street charging map showing how many households within different councils would or wouldn't have a driveway, and how many of them were within a 5-minute walking distance of a public charge point. And suddenly our expectations shifted from an unreasonable 15, 20-minute walk to a much more reasonable 5-minute walk. 2 years ago, when the government published the EV charging infrastructure strategy, that expectation shifted again, because part of the research that they undertook to put that all together was interviewing a number of people who didn't drive electric cars yet, but also didn't have driveways. When they considered the range of options available to them and what their councils might consider, they said, I want charge points outside my house. Where I park my car today, that's where I want to charge my car. So within a 2-minute walk became the new standard. And now when we look at EV charging infrastructure strategies published by different councils, it's not uncommon to see a 1-minute goal as sort of the ambition that councils are looking for. And most recently, I came across an EV charging strategy published by a council, one of the first ones to be approved through the Levi scheme, and they're looking for a 30-second distance from your household. So that has big implications. It means we're going to need charge points everywhere in every street and spread out along those streets, not just in clusters. So our ambition is starting to shape the choices that we need to make. Now, how are we going to get there? By collaborating. So when we look at what is shaping councils and your ability to do this on your own, we're going to need to work together. You're going to need to attract private sector into your area. And you know, there's lots of talk around collaboration in our sector, but I think a lot of that is empty words, and we haven't really defined what that means in practice. And so a couple of weeks ago, I heard this on a public sector podcast from Amanda Hopwood, who's the leader of Durham County Council, and I cobbled together this quote from some of the things she said in that podcast, and look at the words that she's using. So she's defining the challenge for her and her council as we can't do everything. We know the outcomes that we want for our residents, but we can't do that on our own. And we have to define what are our goals and where the private sector can come in and help us deliver those services to our residents that we serve. And I think that's what collaboration really means, is what are your goals as a council? What are the commercial constraints that we face as as private sector organizations who have investors behind us who want to see their money back that we invest in your area with reasonable expectations. How do we align those two goals? Because when you look at them, there are natural conflicts and gaps. So as a council, you're driven by environmental goals, so climate change, air quality, social goals, fair access, value for your residents, maybe some social goals, how much local employment is that going to unlock? As commercial organizations, we're driven by, if we put our money in here, will we get it back? And so let's boil down some of those goals and how you express those. So it might be, we don't want to leave any community behind. Rural areas as well as urban ones. We want fair value, low prices for our residents. We want those networks to be highly reliable, and we want fair access in terms of convenience. Now, when you look at those as a private sector organisation, that sends a lot of red flags. Because those spell, well, it means we're going to have to invest in an area and expect the utilization of our assets to be low for a while. We're serving, if you want us to build ahead of demand means they're not used very much for a while until people make the switch. Controls over prices. Well, one of the underlying costs in our business is the wholesale power price, and that's been hugely variable over the last years. And if you've set limits on that and our ability to flex to those market conditions, that spells a lot of risk for our business model. And companies that sell for less than sell their stuff for less than they buy it, they don't tend to last very long. So we need to manage these constraints that are environmental in our commercial environment. In a way that helps you deliver on the outcomes that you set out. And how do we do that? I think by having open and frank conversations around the constraints that we face, the choices that we have in front of us to deal with those constraints, and the consequences of making one choice over another. Where are we now? That was collaboration. So that's on defining our goals. I think the other thing to consider is how we do that together. So when Philippe set out on his wire, he was out there on his own, but he didn't get there on his own. He had a team around him that he built up over those 6 years to do the things that he felt were too risky for him, and to do the things that he couldn't do on his own. So, how did you get all that gear up there to both sides of the towers without anyone finding out? Well, he had his accomplices to help him out there. And knowing the limits of what we can and can't do ourselves is really important for that. And so when we define that sort of collaboration, I think that's what we need to consider. And then the final thing is risk. So how are we going to shape our relationship in a way that manages all the risks that we face? So how do we identify those risks, quantify them, and then work out ways to treat them? And when you look at the place where we are right now, and where Philippe was, trying to get from one side of a building to another, or in our case, a dirty past to a clean future, and not fall off along the way, because the consequences for Philippe would have been pretty dramatic. We have to get this right. So when you think about the support that you're being given through the Levi scheme, that's amazing. Some of those things will be enduring, some of those aspects will be enduring, but some of those are a one-off, in particular the funding. So there isn't any talk, as far as I'm aware, of more central government funding to support councils deploy or facilitate the deployment of public charging in your area once the Levi money is distributed. So you have to get this right. You have to work out how am I going to use that in a way that amplifies private sector investment so that I achieve in this opportunity the maximum good for as many of my residents as I can. And the way that we're going to do that, I think, was it Colette from Atkins just before me? When she said you face a number of preset conditions around procurement. You have to let those go and let creative solutions come towards you from the private sector. I think that shift in mindset and Amanda said the same thing from Durham County Council. You know, we have to change the way we think and maybe let go of some of the practices that we've had in the past and move on from sort of asset-based procurement where we get very focused on technical specifications, what's the power output, what are the features that come with those charge points, to, you know what, I have these communities that I need served, these are the characteristics of those communities, tell me how you're going to deliver this level of service to them at a certain price point or a value point, because it's very hard to forecast where electricity prices are going, into the future. And those are the kinds of conversations that I think we as charge point operators should be having with you as councils and regional transport bodies, so that, like Colette said, we can unlock much pacier and better provision of the amenities that we have to offer to your communities. So as it happens, we're running a workshop just after this session. We have a couple of more spaces we've been asked to keep open. If you're quick and follow me, you can join us as we explore some of those little those commercial levers and technology choices that I mentioned earlier in a bit more detail. We're not going to solve all the problems there, so we will be around further to have those kind of discussions. But yeah, these are the types of discussions that we need to be having. What makes our business work? What are you trying to achieve? Let's go forward and do that together. And now you're going to hear some really cool things about how different councils and different regional transport bodies are approaching that in their different areas, because each area is different and has different local constraints. So that's it from me, I think. Hopefully that sets the scene. And I'll hand over.
Put my bag there. Thank you very much, Shane. Great. Great scene setter, and also, you know, kind of almost stating the obvious in that you should be thinking about the user and their need, even though that desire for the charging point has changed vastly over the years to, what was that, 30 seconds or something like that, wasn't it? Yeah, it's incredible. It's just like, I just want to walk, just plug it in outside my house. All right, so thank you very much indeed for that, Shane. You are going to be joining us for the panel as well. Now, before we delve into the work of the individual STBs in addressing the EV transition, Simon McGlone from Transport for the North is going to spend 3 minutes or so giving us a quick overview of the STB's collective experience and the range of work undertaken in this area. So Simon, come on up. Thank you.
Sorry, it doesn't want to move on. Can someone move the slide on, please? Thank you, that's great. Okay, wonderful introduction, Shane. I think you really set the scene perfectly there. Whistle Stop Tour through 8-10 years ago through to now. When I think back to then, we had a long way to go, didn't we? And we still do have a long way to go. We have a number of challenges. But when I think about where we are, actually, we've got a really vibrant charge point operator market who are keen to invest, keen to take that calculated risk in our different regions. We have got really strong local authority expertise, and thank you for pinpointing Durham. It was Durham, wasn't it? Yep, that's great for the North. We do have policy certainty, so whether you agree with the 2030, 2035 ban, we do have some policy certainty there in legislation now, and a pathway marked out for that. And what was interesting actually was manufacturers' response to that certain policy announcement was pretty positive. They've committed, they're going for it. So I think we've got a number of challenges ahead, but they're interesting challenges. It's a really exciting time to be working in this space. In terms of STBs then, so I've got probably 2 minutes left to introduce STBs without stealing the thunder of my colleagues. So our bread and butter is regional strategy. It's place-based visions. It's advice to government, advice to OZEV. And we've had really good interaction with OZEV for the last couple of years, shaping policy and legislation on that front. We're also an enabler, though. So we support our local authorities. We build tools such as the things that you'll hear today. And for EV, that's really important. So we don't get in our car, drive to the edge of our local authority boundary and stop and get out. We carry on. We go through the boundaries. None of us think about it. So that holistic planning across a wider scale is really important, but done so in a way that we encourage integration, but we also encourage place-based delivery at a local level. So you hear some really good examples of that coming up soon. Credible analytics and evidence. You heard in the previous session about some of the analytical powers that we have as STBs. So you hear us talk about that and how that hopefully provides confidence in decision making going forward. And then our role as a facilitator, and you'll hear collaboration a lot here. STBs are in a really nice place to convene, to bring opportunities at scale across our partnerships, whether it's across our local authorities. And sorry, apologies, it's a picture of the north here, but you get the point in terms of STBs. Across our authorities, across sectors, energy, digital sectors, spatial sectors, but some of also the innovative stuff that we're doing that Vanessa will touch on around Levi and consortiums that are focused on delivery. So I'll stop there because I'm at risk of jumping in and going too far over my colleagues' work, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of what we might cover over the next half an hour or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. And we're keeping you busy because you are coming back for one of those briefings as well, aren't you? So thanks very much, Simon McGlone there. We are going to get into those quick fire briefings then on some of the STB-led projects and initiatives that are really helping the decision-making process while addressing the practicalities of rolling out public charging infrastructures in the right places. So first up, Hannah Shrimpton, who is Programme Director of Peninsula Transport, is going to take about 5 minutes to give us headline findings from joint studies carried out by Peninsula Transport and Western Gateway on EV charging and alternative fuels for freight. Hannah, welcome.
Okay, thanks. Hi, good morning, everyone. By way of introduction, Peninsula Transport and Western Gateway have worked very closely with each other to commission a number of joint studies. And in particular, we've undertaken some EV infrastructure demand forecasting. So we're sort of taking it back to the early stage of understanding what the future demand will be for charge points across Peninsula and Western Gateway area. And we've also undertaken some consideration of the alternative fuels for road freight. So I'm not going to cover all the detail. My main focus here is on the sort of specific challenges of the Southwest, so rurality and seasonality. In terms of, some of my slides are out of date here, so excuse me if I'm slightly out of kilter, but so this slide talks. I won't go into detail about the specifics on the map. So this is some of the outputs that we got from our commission from WSP on their EV Ready tool, and each of those individual dots is an indicative location for a standard EV charge point. So a third of our population in the Southwest is rural, and as you can see, some of these areas. Where there are blue dots, that means public sector intervention is required. So there's quite large areas, if you can see, if you're in the areas of North Devon, sort of Mid Devon, Central Dorset. There's a number of areas where commercial charge points just won't be the case for at least not in the next sort of 5 to 6 years. And we have almost 20,000 charge points required based on our study to be provided by the public sector should the sort of higher uptake scenario be implemented. And locations for off-street facilities, although potentially more common in rural residences, are not always available in rural settlements, and on-street parking is more challenging in some of our smaller towns and villages. And there aren't always sort of car parking areas in small market towns and villages available. Just to talk about some, actually I won't move on to that yet, just to talk about the further rural challenge, we've also undertaken some consideration of the rapid charge points, so the requirements on the main road and major and strategic road networks. So again, commercial viability is a real challenge, and we require sort of up to 5,000 rapid chargers by 2030, and a quarter of those need to be provided by the public sector, and needs to be cost neutral because our local authorities are not in a position to support those on the long term. Moving on to the sort of the seasonal challenge, obviously these are exaggerated headlines that these are from Christmas 2023. So, and some of you may be familiar with them, but it was a lot of Tesla drivers had significant challenges in charging their vehicles over the Christmas period. Obviously, the media exaggerates some of this, but also it's exacerbated by the Christmas period travel. But it does serve to sort of promote the sort of range anxiety issues that on the perception of limited availability of charging infrastructure in some parts of the country. So what we need to do is overcome some of these sort of perceptions through collaboration. And addressing the needs of this sort of seasonal visitor demand for EV infrastructure is essential for the South West. The tourist and leisure economy is a huge part of our economy, and Peninsula on its own has 18 million visitors a year, and most of those come in by car. We have an overall 25% increase in traffic on some of our major road networks, some up to 70%. So how do we deal with that sort of that range in demand at certain parts of the year? Overall, it's forecast to lead to a sort of 22% increase in charge point demand over those periods. So do we over-provide for the the highest times of the year, or do we focus on destination charging, or a combination of that with en route charging and trying to encourage visitors once in the South West to use public transport or sustainable travel to get around? Just touching on the alternative fuels for freight work that we've also done. So obviously a lot of the talk is around private car charging, but freight is a key part of sort of the internal combustion engine output from, and particularly in the South West, where very little freight is transported by rail. There's very little current provision for alternative fuels in the South West. There's no hydrogen charging locations, and electric vehicle charging for larger freight vehicles is limited, and the transition to alternative fuels for freight is slower, much slower than the private car. I think there is stakeholder concern around the capacity of the network. But this study identified a series of locations on the strategic road network where potential alternative fuel locations should be located. So the green dots are sites identified by Cenex and Atkins on the SRN. But as you can see, there's huge swathes of the area without a green dot because we don't have a lot of SRN within the South West. So we asked them to go back and look for alternative sites as well where there's a sort of a concentration of freight and haulage operators, but you can see there's still areas of the South West where those catchment areas that aren't covered by a 20-kilometre driving distance from a charge point location potentially. So that's a challenge that we need to face nationally, but it's a particular issue in the South West. So in terms of our next steps, Shane touched on the need, and Simon, on the need to sort of bring people together. And I think the key value of STBs is around bringing DNOs, Ofgem operators, the leisure sectors and local authorities to make sort of some tangible progress in a plan for the charge point rollout in some of our more harder to reach areas. Our strategy, both Peninsula Transport Strategy and Western Gateway strategies are soon to be published, I think by the end of March, and both of them have EV at the heart of their sort of targets in terms of their objectives. So we will be working with our local authorities to understand how Levi is to be rolled out across the South West, and making rural mobility solutions a priority, with the promotion of sort of expansion of destination charging. In addition, we're looking to roll out an alternative fuels for freight site selection tool, which will optimise options for freight fuel locations. So I think essentially the challenge is getting an action plan for the South West, but collaborating across the sector as much as we can, and the STBs acting as that facilitator. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, for that insight. Fantastic. Let's move on then, bringing back Simon from Transport for the North, covering the approach to providing a comprehensive and consistent view of EV charging needs. Come on up, Simon.
Right, thank you. I don't think this thing likes me. Could we just move the slide on, please? Oh. Any joy? Ah, there we go. Great. Okay, right. I'll try that again in a second. Right, so in terms of a bit of a tour of what we've been up to over the last 2 or 3 years around EV charging infrastructure. So again, collaboration. The first thing we did was increase our lines of communication across our partners and new partners. So opening up that partnership working across the region, across the north, but also enabling us to do whatever we do in a way that takes people with us and ensures that anything we build, any outputs that we have, are actively used across the region. So a number of the members you can see on the slide there are our typical partners, if you like, the transport partners. And then we've infused this group with our electricity DNOs, which we have 3 of across the region. And they're really great. They've been really engaged with this group all the way through. And I think there's lots of opportunity to enhance that going forward. And then some of the newer partners towards the bottom there, you heard about Ofgem before, but Energy Saving Trust are very involved in Levi and Ordnance Survey in terms of their spatial data. So the collaboration power in this group is really key for us and has landed really well for the region so far. I'm going to try this again. There we go. Great. So we published a regional strategy in October 2022. It did what a strategy does. It talked about policies and recommendations, and a lot of that has come to the fore since then, and that's great to see. What we wanted to do, though, was build something really tangible within that. We didn't want it just to be a strategy report that you pick up and flick through. We wanted something that people could actively use. So we built our EV charging infrastructure framework. Catchy title, I know. So it's essentially a forecasting kit. So we took stock of what was going on across the region. We recognised that many of our combined authorities, we have 20 of those, or our highways authorities, we have 50 of those. We're doing very individualistic forecasting and in very different ways. So we looked at what we had in-house, and we had some really good, powerful analytical tools that we could ride the wave on. And we thought, well, we can give this a go ourselves. We can build this consistent picture across the region and make it accessible for our partners. So that's what we did. And it's essentially a temporal and a spatial route map for what charging you might need where and when across the region. And our local authorities were our primary objective here. It was about putting this information in their hands, but also about increasing that private sector investment. So it's an open tool, and I'll come on to that in a second. It is an uncertain landscape, so we wanted something that could help us navigate that and help our partnership navigate that as well. I mentioned the modelling, so the reason why we can do such a tool is because of TFN's really powerful analytics, whether it's the travel movements across our road network, across the entire region, whether it's our spatial planning data, our land use, our social demographic information. We're really able just to pick all of that up and throw it into this EV piece of work. It is a very modelling heavy piece of work behind the scenes, but up front you've got a very easy to use visual tool that is online on the TFN website. And I think it is still a one of its kind in terms of the openness of this. Many people do this work, but I don't see many that are openly accessible. As I said before, partners, our local authorities, key to this, but we really wanted to flip that ZapMap narrative somewhat. So yes, deployment is slower in the regions compared to London, but how do we go out and actually speak about the demand that we see across the network, across the region, and encourage that investment, such as Shane's, into our place in the near future. So openly accessible, so please go on and press that link and have a play around with the tool. It does ping out some numbers, so and we all have numbers, but you can see here this is for the region, so we can cut our outputs by 5-year increments out to 2050. You can see 2025 and 2030 here. Really key period to ramp up any work on EV over the next 8 to 10 years. We can give you charge point totals, charge point types by category. We can give you the additional demand that would be needed on the electricity grid. You can see an example on the right-hand side there. That's annual equivalent, so the equivalent of 3 million household annual use additional by 2030. We have 6 million or so households in the north, so it's half of our household number. So it is a big increase on the grid, and that's why we're really keen to work with our energy partners going forward. This is cut regionally, but you can do it regionally, local authority level, very granular down to middle super output area level. So you can get details from Wigan to Whitby, Carlisle to Chester, anywhere across the region. You can go in and find out what we think we might be needing in terms of charge points. Yep. That's good. It's come out a bit redder than usual, but one of the things we can do now is we've turned our forecasting work into a monitoring piece as well. So one of our recent updates over the last 2 weeks was to infuse deployment data. So now we can monitor how this changes over time. You can see on the left-hand side is 2025 and the right-hand side 2030. So this is what charging is required to meet DfT's accelerated EV uptake rates. And this is really key. So the House of Lords EV report recently highlighted the need to be monitoring and evaluating our delivery, particularly of Levi. So this puts us in a really nice spot to do just that for the region. Last slide, I think, for me. So really just to flag that we're busy doing a lot of new things. So the joy of having a tool like this is that you can partner up with new collaborators, new data sets, and really take it on a pace. And we've, as I say, we've released updates in February. You can see there the deployment data that I mentioned. We've done some really intuitive things around rapid demand across our road networks, whether it's the SRN or the MRN. And we've also got into the idea of what does accessibility to EVs mean for different people in different places. We're really keen on our systems approach to all of this, so the energy and the spatial collaborations you can see there. You heard Naomi talk about the energy collaborations before. That's something that we're really pushing with our partners in the region and Ofgem. And spatial collaborations, we're really happy that we've got Ordnance Survey in as a partnership to help draw on their spatial expertise moving forward. The other thing this tool allows us to do is get into some of the nitty-gritty assessments, really. So where is commercially viable across our region? How do we encourage a whole network delivery? How do we, Shane talked about rural before, how do we make sure that we are seeing investment right across our region? So we'll be looking at commercial viability. And also the question of adequacy. So we don't yet really fully understand utilization and how to set our delivery models to accommodate that. Do we accommodate queuing? Do we plan for peak demand all the time? These are some of the challenges that we want to get into now that we've got the evidence to play with. And lastly, I should say, the really interesting thing that we're working on and drawing on some of the work that other STB colleagues have done is that we're rolling this tool out nationally. So DfT have asked us to roll this out to the other STBs, which then in turn allows the constituent local authorities in those areas to use this tool going forward. So in the coming year, you'll see the map that I showed you about TFN there spread more widely across England and maybe even further afield, so that we do get that consistent planning and delivery to encourage the actions that we need to take going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. A lot of innovation there. Really liked seeing that open access data as well in terms of what TFN's doing. Our next 5-minute briefing, Vanessa Strange, Head of Infrastructure Investment at Lincolnshire County Council. Vanessa will cover an innovative approach facilitated through Midlands Connect for groups of local authorities to make collective bids for government's local EV infrastructure Levi fund. Vanessa, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I was just sat in the audience listening to that and thinking, gosh, where were we 10 years ago as a local authority in terms of EV? And it took me right back to sitting in a management meeting and someone coming in looking rather harassed, saying, reception have just called, and Jeremy Clarkson and Richard Hammond and the rest of Top Gear are in reception, wanting to know where there is an EV charger in Lincoln. Their vehicle has run out of charge and there is a camera crew there filming. And the collective great and the good minds of our transport management team looked at each other blankly and said, why would we know? Which possibly tells you how the world has changed, because we've moved from a what would that be to do with us to a position of actually how can we change this world and really drive the EV agenda in Lincolnshire, which is an exciting place to be for those of us who are largely in policy world. Sometimes it feels slow. Actually, this is a really exciting, rapidly moving world, isn't it? So in terms of that policy piece, for anyone, again, who thinks policy isn't exciting, actually, if you've got your policy right, it puts us in a really great place to move quickly, doesn't it? So a couple of years ago, we were in a good place in terms of our policy position. We'd just adopted our new local transport plan. As part of that, we got an EV strategy. It meant that our politicians were actually brought into a place where they were more interested in being part of this journey. And they were willing for us to not just be part of a bid, but actually to work with Midlands Connect and say, actually, there's this Levi funding coming forward. Could we lead that Levi bid with Midlands Connect? Could we be the lead local authority? And that was a massive shift for us. As I say, just a few years before, we'd been probably in both an officer and politician space of thinking that would be market-driven. So real shift for us, real opportunity in terms of policy, but also really importantly, yes, I'm going to say the word collaboration, if I can say it, as well. And what the STB did for us in terms of Midlands Connect was really provide that confidence amongst all our partners that we could deliver this. So we've got the 5 local authorities listed there who are all keen to work together and deliver that pilot. And we started to think, what do we really want to achieve out of a pilot? And we all had slightly different things, but actually what we came to want to do was what we promised to do, and that was really about how can we innovate, how can we do things slightly differently. So for us, as a county council, we were really keen to use a pilot as just that. So when we talked to our members, we had to have some brave conversations, and we had to say, actually, we were going to put some infrastructure on the ground that won't be here forever, that you're going to have to accept. Some will work really well. Some might not be quite such a success. We're going to have to do a huge amount of work to get, you know, not a huge number of charges on the ground initially. We're looking in Lincolnshire something like 80, 90 charges in that first wave. But how can we really use it? And for us, it was about, let's trial some different areas. So we were keen, a lot like Hannah said, we've got that rural seasonal challenge. So we've got definitely coastal world was something we wanted to trial. What does it look like to, we've got a huge number of people coming from right in the middle of the Midlands, so Nottingham, Derby type world, wanting to come across to Skegness and the Lincolnshire coast to have their summer holiday. Do they have the confidence that they can travel and charge? But also to really think about our residents, and a lot of this was about our residents as well. And thinking, what does it look like if you're in a market town, if you're in a heritage area, actually if you're in a village with terraced housing, how are we going to solve some of those problems? These are all be things that you're thinking about. But we were thinking, possibly quite selfishly, you know, how are we going to make this then work on the next scale? So using that pilot to really test and trial, working with highways colleagues, pushing it the whole way through, really. Also, the really significant piece about our innovation was working collaboratively in terms of procurement. So coming together with those partners, 5 local authority partners and Midlands Connect, securing just under £1 million for that first pilot wave. Developing partnerships I would reflect on as being hugely important. I think we all know that, but having confidence to say, actually, we're going to let you lead on something. What's the efficiency we can gain by saying your legal team are going to take the lead on this piece, or your procurement team are going to lead on something else? I think many of us in the room from local authorities will have been through this sort of huge learning curve over recent years. And we're all suddenly looking for EV experts, aren't we? We're out there recruiting. And it turns out that actually sometimes you've just got to grow your own. Sometimes you've got to really lean into this world and learn quite quickly, which we have done. We've also recognised there are some bits where we need to call on others. So a real mixture of where do you need to buy in that specialism, where can you grow some knowledge internally, how can you hold on to those staff as well as the other challenge once you've got them up to speed. Thinking about engaging with your internal relationships there. So things like really early on challenges about getting that MOU turned around quickly, working really closely with your procurement team, your market engagement, all really central. The people I haven't put up there, but again, I'll say again, politicians, massively important for us as a rural local authority, pushing them to be a bit braver, pushing them into a space where they wanted to come on this dreadful word journey, apologies, with us. And now we're actually probably pushing officers to say, right, what's the next thing? Where are we? Where are we going to go with this next phase? So finally, just some reflections for us. The approach was right because we needed to think about scale. For us, somewhere like rural Lincolnshire probably isn't at the top of every operator's dream list. We are hugely rural. We've got challenges around our energy supply in some places. I've put in there support, absolutely being able to support one another. Something I haven't listed, but just thinking about that spatial element that we heard about from TFN there. Actually, I benefit in terms of my team. We've brought together our spatial planning world, our transport policy world, and also infrastructure, so working on things like energy as well. So getting that policy piece really embedded within the local authority being important. Understanding the scale of resource you'll need, I will just reflect, it's really intense to get this right, I think. Lots of people take a different approach. Perhaps they're keener to say, let's let the market do some of this work for us. For our politicians to have confidence in this first wave, I think they needed to feel really engaged. And for sometimes that's quite hard work. That's, goodness me, am I going to have to walk every street and show them every charge point, because that's not normally how we approach these things. But actually, if that's what it takes to get over those first few months, that's kind of fine, isn't it? That's buying into the world. So I know we're going to talk much more about this today, but I'm really pleased to be able to talk to you and share what we've learnt along the way. Thank you.
Vanessa, thank you very much indeed. The briefings all overran slightly, so we are pretty much out of time to go to a panel discussion, but what I wanted to do was just find out, is anyone in the audience who has a question for anyone who's just spoken in the last half an hour? Because it'd be good to take those, I think. No? No hands at all. Someone at the back there, so there's a microphone next to you. Can you tell us who you are, where you're from, and who you want to direct the question to?
Phil Ballman, Arthur D. Little. I direct the question to all of them, really. I was interested whether there's a clear, consistent view about the commercial model for encouraging EV charging infrastructure. And if people got a view.
Okay, Shane, Simon, Hannah, Vanessa, anyone would like to pick up? And how about, this is going to be very brave, stand up and turn around to the chap who's asking the question, who's right at the back. Who wants to pick it up?
I can.
Shane?
Okay. Do you want to go?
No, go.
Oh, right. Okay, so the commercial model, yeah, it's really important. Really important. So what do we look at? So we do lots of forecasts on what the utilization could be. The density of the population, demographics, all the income stuff, you know, there's lots we put into that. And then, you know, like what Vanessa was saying, the cost to install is different in different places. So, you know, Northern Power Grid doesn't have the best grid. UKPN is in the south is much better. Their grid is in a much better condition, so it costs a lot more to put charge points in the north than it does in the south, and it varies across the country. So yeah, there's lots of local factors, but there's also sort of a macro set of conditions that we consider. And there's a bunch of different variables that we need to think about as well. So how quickly are people going to take up electric cars? What's happening with the future of power prices and those sorts of things, and any other sort of policy incentives or constraints that may come down the line, and technology changes. So it's complex. It's complex, I would say, and there's a lot to consider. And I think, but the more open we are with each other, the more we can find answers to those problems.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you very much indeed. We do have to move on with our next session, but I'm sure, as Shane said, you've got a stand outside. I'm sure you can grab people for questions later on, because we've got to move to our next session. So thank you very much indeed, Hannah, Simon, Shane and Vanessa. Please give them a round of applause.